In part 1, 2, and 3 of Siege, the documovie, we examined how beginning largely in the 1930s, America was infiltrated from within. The objective was an information operation to turn the hearts and minds of Americans against the principles and values that are at the very foundation of our constitutional republic. Then, we examined the Marxist goal of replacing American values with global values of open borders, redistribution of wealth, population control, elimination of private property rights, and radical environmentalism that elevates nature over man. We also learned that for socialist, neo-Marxist, and globalist values to be successfully inculcated into the worldview of Americans, the obstacle of strong families, communities, and institutions led by patriotic American men of courage and convictions had to be destroyed. Thus, toxic masculinity, white privilege, and racism is used to shame patriotic Americans into surrendering their values and convictions in order to avoid being marginalized, characterized, and vilified. For generations, Americans did not fully fight the Marxist infiltration within our own nation, but allowed them every opportunity to carry out their long march through our institutions. In part 4 of Siege, the documovie, we will reveal that since the end of World War II, America has not only increasingly surrendered to the Marxists at home, but willingly surrendered to them in Eastern Europe, China, North Korea, and Vietnam. The consequences of such surrender has led to America not only empowering our enemies, but in some cases, actually funding their regimes as they build sixth-generation warfare technology that America does not also possess at this time.
From a Moscow command center, Putin watched the hypersonic missile leave its launch tube and, according to the Russians, strike a target 3,700 miles away, declaring it invulnerable to intercept. Russia says it can be armed with a nuclear weapon and travel up to 20 times the speed of sound. Without confirming the results of today's test, the Pentagon has acknowledged that America is vulnerable.
We don't have any defense that could deny the employment of such a weapon against us.
Russia first touted their hypersonic missile in March with an animation showing warheads flying towards Florida.
The substitute for victory has led America to be viewed by our enemies as a nation of fools that can be counted upon to not fight, but to eagerly seek a compromise that almost always leaves our enemies advancing and America damaged and ever close to demise. As we will see in part 4 of Siege, the documovie, America's track record since the end of World War II is why the communists knew they could fake the collapse of communism in 1989. Through this fake collapse of communism, the USSR was able to take financial advantage of the West and use our technology and capitalism to rebuild their military and shore up their crumbling economy. Then, they used Islamic terrorism to distract America from paying attention to them, while their Islamic proxies wore down our military and drained our resources through the global war on terror. And if you don't think their plan has worked, all you have to do is look to the summer of 2018, when Russia and China carried out what some experts believe was the largest military exercise in world history. Some of these same experts believe that not only was Russia and China practicing an attack on our critical infrastructure, but they were also practicing a nuclear strike on America with their sixth-generation warfare capability. In this broadcast, you will hear from a former KGB agent now living in the United States that I personally interviewed on my radio broadcast. He is warning Americans that Russia is the enemy of America. Russia is still a communist nation, he warns, and they are aligned with all of America's enemies. They also have infiltrated America with KGB assets to undermine America. He will also tell you that since the 1930s, Russia has been funding and training globalist terrorists, including some of the most well-known Islamic terrorists on the face of the earth. Let me make this very clear. America's willing surrender and capitulation to the communist and Marxist has not gone unnoticed by Islamic states. In fact, you can be sure the communist and Marxist have trained the Islamic terror states and used them to de-Christianize the West, create chaos, and spread our military across the globe in a war on terror. The net result is that Americans are now rightfully tired of the high price, both in human and financial terms, that these endless wars have cost our nation. The endless wars, with troops spread across the globe, have increased our national debt and diverted our resources that should have been invested in updating and strengthening our military technology, so we might maintain peace through strength. We also must never forget the human treasure that has been lost and wounded in wars we apparently never had any intention of winning. Make no mistake, the same surrender at home and abroad that America has suffered at the hands of the communist is now being repeated with our Islamic enemies. But it gets worse. America's Marxist and Islamic enemies have formed an alliance known as the Red-Green Alliance. This is our nation's last chance. If we lose to the siege of this red-green axis, America as we have known it will be lost. Only if we awaken enough Americans to the clear and present dangers now facing America do we have any hope of remaining the land of the free. Part 4 of Siege, the documovie, begins right now.
This is a Brannon, Howse, and WVW Broadcast Network documovie. Siege, the clear and present dangers pushing America to the brink of a Marxist, Islamic revolution, civil war, World War III, and globalism. And now, here is your host, Brannon Howse.
On June 19, 1962, the leader of the Communist Party and USSR, Nikita Khrushchev, foretold where America finds itself today. We have some hope of victory, or of at least slowing down the defeat of America, but only if we can awaken more Americans to the truth of what is presented in this documovie. If we do not achieve this objective, we may have to fight when there is no hope of victory, because it is better to be dead than red. Thank you for watching Part 4 of Siege, the documovie.